With the virus spreading all around the world, causing high unemployment and manufacturing problems, we discuss this and more with Bob Mason of FX Empire. This is the week ahead. Hello, Bob. Trust you are keeping well. Thank you for joining us today. Let's jump straight into it. With the virus spreading at an alarming rate, with huge unemployment and production declines this week, how's it looking for next week? Can we expect the unemployment and production declines to continue, or do you see an improvement?
Quite a week ahead on the economic calendar. In fact, there's very little for the markets to consider in a shortened week, with Good Friday at the end of it. Key stats really are going to be stats out of the US. You've got inflation figures for March, then you got prelim economic sentiment figures at the end of the week for April that will also garner plenty of attention. Obviously, we're expecting, economic sentiment for consumers to be materially impacted by, the large, historical slide in, employment levels. And then obviously we're going to see particular interest again in the weekly jobless claims that, jumped through to 6 million last week. So lack of stats, but there will be some sensitivity to numbers. Really though, obviously with the economic calendar on the lighter side, the focus will be on the coronavirus numbers. Markets are going to be looking for the numbers to start easing back, the daily rises as the lockdown continues. If that doesn't happen, then obviously risk aversion will continue to linger. And we're not going to, then that means that the markets have yet to really bottom out. So stats on the lighter side, really focused on US calendar, but coronavirus really will likely be the center stage.
With the US bearing the brunt now of a huge increase in cases and unfortunately deaths, how's it looking for the commodity countries? How are they faring?
Last week we saw crude oil prices bounce around, more than a 20% rise on Thursday. That came off the back of news that China's going to take advantage of, obviously the low prices, and then the US president yet again getting involved in oil prices in a bid to deliver price stability that ultimately would, save him from bailing out the US shale producers. So economically, there's a lack of data really in the week ahead. IVPMI numbers for the loonie, these are March figures, and for the Aussie dollar, we got the RBA monetary policy statement, which will be the main driver. Obviously, we're not expecting the RBA to cut rates again. They're going to likely sit back and assess the damage and want to see how the latest moves will filter through. But it's a bit too early considering the fact that the lockdowns continue. So status quo for now. So that leaves, obviously the commodity currencies in the hands of risk appetite, and obviously that then is also in the hands of, the numbers on the coronavirus. Obviously if we see a continued rise, then commodity currencies will come under further pressure. Markets are expecting, things to begin to return to normal end of April. We're now first week of April coming to a close, so that may be a little bit optimistic. So pressure could return, if we're looking at May, June. So expect a bit of volatility in the week ahead, particularly with the lack of stats.
With much focus on Europe and the US at the moment, how's it looking for the Asian giants, specifically China and Japan?
For the Japanese yen, it's quite weak on the economic calendar with household spending figures in focus. They're not going to have a material impact on the yen, however. It's all about risk appetite in the coronavirus. Obviously, we're going to see some support for the yen should the spread of the virus continue across the US. There is, however, a risk of a spike in Japan, which continues to limit the upside for the yen. So a lot depends on the numbers in the week ahead, particularly with the economic data on the lighter side. Obviously, if we see labour market conditions in the US continue to deteriorate and the lockdown needing to extend beyond, the end of April, Trump was looking at Easter. If it looks like beyond the end of April, then obviously the dollar could come under pressure and the yen could find some support. It's all a game at the moment, really, about which economies are going to rebound sooner. Expectations were for the East to come out of it earlier, but there's still a lot of lockdown and weak demand from overseas, so that limits any material upside and any recovery. So pressure's still on. For the yuan, we saw economic data improve for March, significantly from what we saw in February. Obviously, global demand is particularly weak still, so we're not expecting a sharp rebound. But hey, when you see the MBS numbers and manufacturing sector coming out of contraction, that's quite impressive. Whether that's sustainable, however, remains to be seen. So for the yuan, sub 6.9 against the dollar, probably unlikely for now, but, knocking on the door of sub 7 could be on the cards should, the bad news not come out of China and, there be another spike in the spread of the virus.
And lastly, to finish up, with little economic data being released, the major news, of course, is the coronavirus spread. Can you comment on how it's affecting political and economic side of things?
On the economic political front, the landscape's materially shifted as a result of the virus. Not only have we seen different governments have different attitudes toward the virus and towards tourism and protectionism, that will likely leave a scar, at least for the foreseeable future. Some countries shut down borders early, protected themselves and tourists, and provided the necessary support for repatriation. Others didn't quite do the same. So that's going to leave a lingering mark on those nations, particularly the ones that are, dependent upon tourism to drive economic growth. Then you got obviously demand for exports and goods. If you're an economy that's self-sufficient, you're going to do far better. Countries are going to be looking to recover from within through domestic consumption, so that puts the likes of the US on the front foot once the spread of the virus eases. Economies and governments that have been relying upon tourism historically may really suffer for the foreseeable future, particularly when tourists will have a seed of doubt about revisiting those countries when you hear of people being left high and dry with little to no support from the respective governments. Without wanting to mention any names, obviously, there's been plenty of press and publicity on this, so expect that to have a lingering mark. Politically, diplomatic relations will also be strained as a result, so that will have a material impact to consider.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Please keep safe. That was The Week Ahead, and we will see you again next time.